Reincarnation. The idea that we return to another body after the death of our current body has fascinated humanity since the beginning of time. It raises arresting questions.
What is life? What is consciousness?
Is there a biological base of consciousness?
It's the kind of question that we cannot address from a scientific point of view.
Is birth really the beginning?
It's one of the more difficult questions from either from a scientific or a philosophical standpoint.
Is death truly the end?
Presumably, everyone has had past lives.
New discoveries from the frontiers of consciousness studies.
You cannot reduce mind consciousness to brain activity.
Near-death experiences.
Consciousness separates from the body and goes over the body.
And past life memories research.
There is some entity that carries on.
Are shedding new light on the way we look at life. Science today is witnessing a paradigm shift.
The paradigm shift is going to affect us in a major way.
New alternative explanations are emerging.
Science is really good at experiments and theory development, and marry that with the mystical experience, we'll develop a whole new civilization.
Could it be that now, finally, we are closer to understanding the timeless mysteries of life, death, and reincarnation?
I went into mild shock when I heard my 5-year-old talk about his wife and family.
Read it and tell me which year is this.
He's pretended to be blind even though there was nothing wrong with his eyes.
1873.
George Jones was blind in real life.
It turned out the language was Sassanid, which hasn't been spoken in 600 years.
Some unknown men entered the gate and they shot him.
He ran his little finger along with different faces and then stopped at the one of his grandfather and said, "That's me."
Mental images, believed to be recollections of previous lives, are the simple definition of past life memories. A large part of unraveling the mystery of reincarnation depends on answering the question, are past life memories genuine?
Well, anybody can believe in reincarnation if they want. They don't need any evidence to believe in it. But to me, I think that I'm always interested in what is really true and what is provably true. I guess, I'm just a science person. I'm a child of the scientific age, and I don't like to believe things because people tell me they're true or because I want them to be true. I want to believe things that are proven to be true by evidence that you can see and touch.
Although people sometimes joke about their past lives or about their next one, for many people, the thought of reincarnation may seem foreign or even absurd. And since reincarnation conflicts with the scientific and religious beliefs of many, the idea that research might actually support the concept of reincarnation is surprising. Scientists, researchers and scholars the world over have followed up on intrigue and skepticism by subjecting past life memories to rigorous scientific scrutiny. Past life memories that are hypnotically induced involve a willing subject who is hypnotized and then gently led back in time by the hypnotist's suggestions. During this process, commonly called regression, the subject often recounts emotionally charged memories of his or her past lives.
I worked with several children. They all remembered their last life. It was amazing. And then when they go to school, they sort of get brainwashed and forget it. Only later, 20 or 30 years, should they experience some spontaneous memory or undergo hypnotic experience, do they remember. But my experience with children is up until they go to school, almost all of them had some glimmer and could tell me what they were, who they were, and what they did in their past life.
Carol Bowman began exploring cases of reincarnation when her young son Chase described his own past life death on a Civil War battlefield, an account so accurate it was authenticated by expert historians.
When my son was 5 years old in 1988, he developed a fear of loud booming sounds. And we first noticed it at a 4th of July celebration where they had fireworks. And when the fireworks began and the big booming sounds began, he became hysterical, crying and sobbing, and he wouldn't stop. So things like this happen with children, and I didn't know the cause, so we carried on. And a few weeks later, it happened again when he was exposed to loud booming sounds in a swimming pool area. So at that point, he was able to say that it was the loud sounds that frightened him.
In the coming weeks, Chase's condition continued to worsen. Any booming sound would send him into hysteria, and his chronic eczema got worse. Though he always had severe eczema on his right wrist, whenever he became upset or tired, he now scratched his wrist until it bled. No amount of medical treatment or intervention provided any relief.
But occasionally, I'll run across some trauma or some condition, psychological or physical, that doesn't seem to have any explanation in this life or this childhood. And then I will suggest, let's try some hypnosis.
Carol's concern for such behavior and a chance visit by a hypnotherapist friend led to a past life regression session with Chase. Nothing in the world had prepared Carol for what came out of that session. In his hypnotic sleep, Chase spoke in detail about the Civil War.
Immediately, Chase was seeing images of himself as an adult male soldier, and he said he was crouching behind a rock, and he had a gun, a long gun with a sword at the end. And I didn't know what was going on. You know, I was trying to think what Sesame Street episode this was, or something he had seen or heard about. But I was a stay-at-home mother. He hadn't gone to school at that point, and I knew what he had been exposed to, so I was very surprised. And he went on to say how he was scared, sad, confused. There was smoke everywhere. He didn't even know who he was shooting at. And he was speaking of this in the first person as if he were there. And he said, I'm crouching behind a rock and suddenly I'm hit in the wrist. And he grabbed his right wrist and he said, I black out. And Norman, who at this point had worked with many adults doing past life therapy, knew that Chase was into a past life story.
Encouraged by the therapist's words to go into further detail, Chase revealed more about his previous personality and his family.
And Chase said, they take me to a hospital, but it's not like a regular hospital. It's just poles in the ground with something covering it. And he said that they put me on a bed, but it's not like a regular bed, it's a hard bench. And he said they bandage my wrist and they tell me I have to go back into battle. I miss my wife and family. And that was the moment for me. I think I went into mild shock when I heard my 5-year-old talk about his wife and family.
Although he was only 5 years old, he was now speaking as a grown-up soldier, reluctantly going into war and killing other soldiers. He responded to the therapist as a grown-up man and gave vivid details about the time, the place, and his feelings.
Chase went on with his story and he said, I have to go back into battle. They want me to go behind a cannon. And he said he was scared. He said, I'm walking down a road and there are chickens on the road and there's this cart being pulled by a horse and it has a cannon on it. And at this point his eyes popped open. He had his eyes closed as he was remembering this.
Following this brief encounter with his past life, Chase showed a remarkable recovery with his eczema and his fear of loud noises. Over the next 2 years, Chase had other memories from this lifetime, and as his language skills developed, he was able to express himself better.
Coming over him close so I gotta look close.
In 1991, when America was engaged in its first war with Iraq, a very upset Chase went in for another hypnotic session.
He said it was in the 1860s, which was when the American Civil War was, and he described himself as a black man.
In his recollections, Chase gave detailed accounts of his life as an African-American soldier, his wife and family, his recruitment into the army, and a long march into the battlefield. Chase was a reluctant soldier, unprepared for the ghastly war cries and loud cannon blasts. A very shocked Chase found himself behind a cannon on the battlefield and suddenly experienced himself floating above the field. He could look down and see lots of smoke.
He said, "I've left the body," he said, and I said, "Well, where do you go?" And he said, "I'm up, and I'm looking at what happened. I'm glad to be out of that life. It was a very difficult life."
In this state of being, Chase could move around freely across barriers and visit his family. He could see that they were all right, and he could leave them in peace.
So my conclusion was that a part of his consciousness was still in that past life because he felt unfinished about that experience. And by talking it through, he was able to let go of it.
Encouraged by the healing potential of past life memories, as exhibited in her son's case, Carol Bowman went on to document and help thousands of people heal their phobias and traumas.
These memories come up spontaneously, but they can also be healing opportunities if looked at properly as discerning what the child has brought forward from a past life. If they're bringing something positive like precocious abilities or a sense of empathy or compassion that is unusual in a small child, that's wonderful. There's no need to do anything. But if they are bringing the remnants of a trauma with them and they exhibit fears or specific behaviors relating to the trauma, then the memories need to be processed with them so they can move on and let go of the past. So I found that there is a real need in our culture to talk about these memories, to normalize it, and to let parents know this can be a healing opportunity for the soul of the child. And it also explains many aspects of the personality which might be puzzling to a parent. You know, why do they have an obsession with airplanes? Or why are they terrified of water? Or why do they sit down at the piano at age 3 and start playing Bach? So it explains a lot of things about personality that the Western psychotherapeutic models or the Western psychology just doesn't explain.
Cautious researchers have pointed out, and rightly so, that the therapeutic value of past life regression doesn't prove that the subject's memories are real. What they claim to be memories from a previous life may just be the subject's imagination, triggered by the therapist's suggestions. This is certainly possible, even probable in some cases. But for other, more significant cases, this explanation seems improbable, if not impossible. In May 2014, Major Singh, a past life regression therapist in India, investigated a case where the subject reported having an unexplained, desperate fear of loneliness since childhood. For Sandeep, no amount of conscious prodding and trying to link this phobia to any particular incident in his life resolved the problem. This is when Major Singh recommended to Sandeep that he undergo a hypnotic regression session.
Through hypnotherapy, we get in touch with our subconscious mind. And we get in touch with other levels of minds also, superconscious, unconscious, and even more deeper level of subconscious, theta level.
Sandeep was a reluctant subject. To try something so unfamiliar to him, he had to be cancelled first.
We call it pre-hypnotic discussion. I talk to those people for half an hour, 45 minutes sometime, to bring their mind to a level where they can accept, they can relax mentally and let go whatever happens. We don't want them to imagine anything.
How old are you? You're all aware about it. I'm counting 1, 2, 3. When I reach the count of 3, everything will be clear.
Sandeep's reluctance did not allow him to easily slip into hypnosis. It took him longer than usual.
Your subconscious memory bank is just perfect.
No memories surfaced immediately or clearly. But for an experienced therapist like Major Singh, this was not totally unfamiliar.
Sometimes it's very easy, and sometimes some people actually, they do not see the scenes clearly. They see the scenes hazily.
As Sandeep fell deeper and deeper into his hypnotic sleep, finally he began to talk. Vivid memories scurried through his consciousness, and he found himself in his previous life. Sandeep, a devout Hindu in his present life, saw himself as a Muslim teenager working in a mosque in his previous life. As the regression progressed, he recalled his previous name, the name of the city where he lived, even down to the name of the street his house was in. It was 1873, and Sandeep started remembering other details from that birth clearly. He saw his friend, his girlfriend. He even recalled their names. He spoke about his favorite eatery and his regular menu there. Astonishingly, he even recalled that on that particular day, the restaurant had served his favorite dishes with excessive spices. However much the details were thrilling and exciting, Major Singh did not get the information he was looking for. Instead of lingering on, he progressed the regression further, hoping to arrive at an event that could shed some light on the phobia.
1, reaching to the next event, 2, and 3 now.
Finally, Sandeep arrived at the time of his death in the previous birth. He recalled the precise emotions and confirmed the exact moment when he exited and stood beside his lifeless physical body.
Then his soul came out. His soul saw everything, he being taken to the graveyard, people crying, and he saw his grave being dug and everything.
Sandeep, or Gulfam as he was known in that life, had now died, but still nothing. No event accounted for his present phobia of loneliness. There was little hope that any event would come up now which could explain the phobia. Nevertheless, Major Singh continued to progress his regression further. After some startling journeys through various landscapes, Sandeep came in the presence of a glowing personality. Sandeep recalled liking to be in this personality's presence. He found it calming and blissful. Major Singh encouraged Sandeep to remain here for some time after his tiresome journey. Now came the key that would unlock the mystery of Sandeep's phobia. The glowing personality began to leave, and Sandeep was overcome with emotion. He begged. He pleaded the personality not to leave him alone. He was scared, and sobbing urged the personality not to abandon him. Major Singh finally got to what he was looking for. He immediately started to console Sandeep. He explained to him that this person was his guide, and that he had come here to guide him towards his further impending journey. Major Singh brought Sandeep to terms with this painful separation and made him see it in its proper light. Finally, Sandeep fell silent. Major Singh's work was done. It was time for Sandeep to wake from his hypnotic sleep.
I have a number of cases where somebody is scared of fire, somebody is scared of water, somebody is scared of heights, and somebody is scared of darkness. But once you go, and when the scene is replayed in the hypnosis state, and that comes from subconscious, it comes to consciousness and released. And we've been able to heal lots of difficult cases of phobias.
Sandeep was able to let go of this painful memory. He woke up feeling refreshed and has since not experienced the fear of loneliness. Xenoglossy is a term used for a paranormal phenomenon in which a person is able to speak or write a language one could not have acquired by natural means. There have been numerous documented cases of xenoglossy relating to past life memories. Is it possible that not just phobias and mental experiences, but sometimes particular know-how or knowledge too carry over from supposed previous lives? In the 90s, Dr. Witten studied a young American named Harold Jaworski, who, during hypnotic regression, described his past life as a Viking named Thor. When Dr. Witten instructed Harold to write down the conversations he was remembering, he wrote down 22 words and phrases, none of which Harold understood when in normal consciousness.
This was a man who spoke Norse, which is very close to Icelandic language. So I was able to get a Icelander to listen to the tapes. I taped it, and he was able to say that yes, this was a very early form of Icelandic language.
Dr. Witten submitted Harold's notes to several authorities in Icelandic and Norwegian languages, who were able to conclusively identify 10 out of the 22 words as belonging to Old Norse, a Viking language that hadn't been spoken for over 700 years. During another session, Harold recalled another past life, this time as a Mesopotamian man named Zando,
and asked him to write in the language that he knew, which he did.
Dr. Witten asked Harold, while remembering his life as Zando, to write down the words for common concepts such as brother, house, and clothing. With a pencil and in a childlike hand, Harold carefully created a mysterious, spidery script.
I found someone in the Near Eastern section of the Library of Congress in Washington who was able to translate it. And it turned out the language was Sassanid Pahlavi, which hasn't been spoken in 600 years. There are no examples of this language other than on coins in a museum in Baghdad, which this man had never been to. But the answers to the questions, as he wrote them in this Sassanid Pahlavi language, were exactly what I expected.
Could it be that Harold simply accessed this knowledge from his deep subconscious memory? Does Harold's ability to communicate in two verifiable languages that no longer exist point towards the reincarnation theory? Hypnotic regression is not required for past life memories to emerge. Sometimes subjects in normal waking consciousness have memories that can only be attributed to past lives. Such spontaneous past life memories are scientifically more credible because they are not induced by the hypnotist's influence or the increased suggestibility of the person under hypnosis. Researchers investigating cases of spontaneous past life memories have been gathering data for a long time. But a systematic approach to reincarnation research really began with one man, Dr. Ian Stevenson. While working in the University of Virginia's Psychiatry Department in 1967, Stevenson founded the Division of Perceptual Studies to investigate cases of past life memories. Stevenson proposed that emotions, memories, and physical injuries in the form of birthmarks could be transferred from one life to another. He traveled across the world for 40 years and investigated the cases of over 3,000 children who claimed to remember past lives. Dr. Stevenson gradually got other researchers interested in investigating cases. Dr. Erlendur Haraldsson, a psychologist at the University of Iceland, became interested in past life cases in the 1970s. Dr. Antonia Mills began assisting Dr. Stevenson on cases in Northwest America. Dr. Jim B. Tucker joined Dr. Stevenson at the Department of Personality Studies. Though cases are found all over the world, it is easiest to find them in the areas with a general belief in reincarnation. Once a case has been brought to their attention, The investigators try to get as much information as possible from the families and others concerned.
Investigating the cases depends to some extent on the type of the case. In most of the cases, we have gotten to them after the main events have already taken place. In other words, after the child has talked about a past life, has given enough details where people have identified who we call the previous personality, whose life the child seems to be remembering. And then the families have met. When that's the case, then what we do is interview the child and the family and other witnesses to try to document as best we can what the child said before the families met and before the previous person was identified.
We do a lot of questioning of witnesses. It is almost more or less like a legal investigation.
Information is collected based on recollections, recognitions, birthmarks, birth defects, and any peculiar behavior the subject exhibits. In 2013, Dr. Antonio Mills investigated 3 distinct cases of spontaneous past life memories from one family in the British Columbia Islands of Haida Gwaii.
Just to meet, when I had been invited to a luncheon to meet somebody else who had talked about a previous life, that I got to meet Lila, and she had 3 cases that she spoke about. 2 of her sons are examples, and the word that they use in Haida is Hanji.
Aunt Layla, as she's fondly known in her family, talks about her elder son Chris. It's a typical example of a recognition and peculiar behavior, spontaneous past life memory case.
My oldest son, Chris, he's now 41. When he was a very little boy, we noticed that he was talking about things that happened before his time. And we used to drive by this house at the end of the village, and he'd want to stop and look. And he'd tell us that's where he used to live. And at the same time, he'd pretend he was blind, and we never put 2 and 2 together. And my mom realized that the person he was, a Hanji, as we say, was George Jones. And he was talking about George's wife after he had passed. But the reason he was acting blind was George Jones was blind in real life. In the house we passed, his wife was still alive, and he used to want to go visit him.
In very rare cases, a prediction of rebirth or an announcing dream has also been reported.
It's fairly common in a variety of cultures for someone in the child's family, usually its mother, to have a dream before the birth where a person comes and says they want to be born to the mom or to come live with them or something like that. And these dreams are often interpreted as a request from a previous person to come back and be reborn to the mom.
Aunt Layla's second son was a typical prediction case. Her grandfather, John Williams, appeared to her in her dreams.
Her other son, Charlie, another son, was based on dreams. Her appreciation case was based on dreams, which is a feature that occurs quite often in indigenous cultures, that people will dream.
I think the most powerful one was my son Travis. When I was pregnant with him, I had very vivid dreams, who we call chinnies, like grandfathers. We call them chinnies. I was about 8.5 months pregnant, and I could feel a presence in the room. And I was staying over at my friend Pansy's place. We called each other, and I turned around. I wasn't scared anymore. I turned around, and there was this person by me, and he had the old caps that the chinnies used to wear, the checkered shirts, like the black and red or black and blue, and the wool pants that they used to wear back then. And I reached out, and my hand went right through. I could see the person, the man, but I couldn't see the eyes. And then for 2 weeks straight, I had the same dream of my chinny John Williams. walking from one corner up the street, across the fields, and then up to the Seagate Hotel. And the day I gave birth to my son Travis, my dreams quit.
The confirmation that Charlie was indeed the rebirth of grandfather John Williams came when Charlie was 2 years old.
When Charlie was 2 years old, they went to her Auntie Reed's funeral. And at the funeral, her Uncle Jerry Williams felt this real fascination for this 2-year-old boy. He said, he just really wanted to know about him.
My Uncle Jerry Williams, his daughter was tapping me on the shoulder and she said, Auntie, Dad wants to know who that is. And I'm going, it's Travis. And she said, I know, but he wants to know who he is. Then I realized that she meant who his Hunji was. And I said, John Williams, and turned around again because we were in church, right? But I never put two and two together that he had a strong connection to my son because my son was his dad, like came back as his dad.
When do children start to speak about a previous life? And what exactly triggers off these memories?
So the children, the average age when they start talking about a past life is 38 months. So they're usually 2 or 3 when they start coming out with these things. Occasionally they've made gestures even before they can speak really that end up being connected with what they're talking about.
The manner in which children talk about the previous life can vary. Some of the children speak in a detached way, but many show great emotions as they recount events or talk about people from a previous life. Some cry regularly to go back to their old family, or exhibit other peculiar behavior. These behavioral features demonstrate that the past life claims of these children are very meaningful to them. Recognition of faces from the previous life is a key element for an investigator trying to put this puzzle together. Aunt Layla's granddaughter Rihanna recognized her son from the previous birth.
Rihanna, when she was 2 years old, she went up to this man, Francis Ingram, and an adult, and this was just a 2-year-old. She climbed up on his lap and she put her arm around his head and she said, I found my baby.
And then after that, on a few more occasions when she seen him, all she did was stare and stare and stare at him. She blew 7 kisses to him.
Rihanna started humming church hymns when she was 2.5.
She never heard hymns in my house, but she was humming Amazing Grace.
Apart from church hymns, Rihanna also liked to sing Haida songs, which she had not heard before.
They also noticed that when she was very young, she would sing Haida songs, which they didn't know. Her mother didn't know.
No, just the things my 2 boys did and she was doing. And like I said, when we put her on my recliner with a Haida blanket and a drum, and to sing Haida songs when you're that little and not know it is pretty amazing.
Usually, in cases of children's spontaneous past life memories, as they grow old, these memories begin to fade away. Rihanna too started to forget the Haida songs that she sang so naturally until some time back.
That ability that she especially had when she was small began to diminish a little as she got older, but she's learning them now from the external way.
An interesting feature of Rihanna's case is that in her previous birth as Lucy Frank, she had died more than 35 years before Rihanna was born.
It was quite a long period of time in that Lucy Frank died 35 to 40 years ago, so this isn't a super quick comeback. She showed all these various traits that made her family impressed that she was Lucy Frank come back.
Another very famous and interesting case of past life recognition is the story of Sam Taylor from the United States. Sam Taylor, a boy from Vermont, was born a 1.5 years after his grandfather died.
When Sam was 1.5 years old, his father was changing his diaper one day, and Sam looked up at him and said, when I was your age, I used to change your diapers. And his parents really thought that was quite peculiar. They had never given reincarnation a second thought, and in fact his mother was the daughter of a Southern Baptist minister.
Following that incident, Sam gradually began saying that he had been his grandfather. He also said, "I used to be big, and now I'm small." At other times, Sam correctly gave many other statements.
He also talked about how his wife made milkshakes for him every day near the end of his life, which was true for his grandfather. And not just that she had made milkshakes, but that she had made them with the food processor rather than the blender. So one night, Sam walks over and starts pointing to pictures of his grandfather's first car. There was no one in the picture, but just a picture of the car. And Sam got very excited and said, "Hey, that's my car." So to test him, his mom showed him a elementary school class photo of the whole class that his grandfather was in, and asked Sam to pick himself out of the picture, and he ran his little finger along the different faces and then stopped at the one of his grandfather and said, "That's me."
In both cases, Sam and Rihanna came up with information that they had never seen or heard before. Their recognitions from previous lives and their statements make for an impressive case. In some other cases, the children not only recognized, but also led the way to the home of a previous personality. They could also recount events that took place and seemed able to recognize the changes that had taken place since the death of a previous personality. Nazi al-Danaf is one such case. Nazi al-Danaf was born near Beirut, Lebanon in February 1992. He began to speak of a previous life at the age of 2. He described the life of a man his family did not know. He said the man carried pistols and grenades. He had a pretty wife and young children. He gave detailed information of his multi-storied house with trees around it. He recalled a cave that was near the house and also remembered a mute friend. He vividly remembered being shot by a group of men. Dr. Haraldson began investigating the case in May 2000.
He stated that he had lived in Haram Shamoun, in a town not very far away, and he wanted to go there because he said he had children and a house and so on. Well, his parents, they ignored him for a long time. They didn't want to hear about this. They didn't want to bring him there. But he was very insistent, and in the end, they decided to take him.
To their utter shock, Nazi gave them the precise directions to his previous house in a small town 10 miles away. After initial investigation, it was quickly discovered that a man named Fuad seemed to fit Nazi's statements. Fuad's widow and her 5 children now lived in that house.
She was, of course, rather suspicious about him and asked him a few questions. And the boy was able to answer them all satisfactorily.
Nazi also accurately described a couple of other incidents from his previous personality's life. The widow and her 5 children were very impressed and convinced that Nazi was indeed the rebirth of Fuad. What was truly fascinating was the accuracy with which he was able to describe his death in the previous life.
And then we came to know more about the circumstances of this man. He had been a bodyguard to the leader of the Druze in Lebanon. But one night, it was during the war, during the Israeli occupation of Lebanon, some unknown men came to the Druze center. They shot 2 guards at the gate, then entered the gate, and they found that man we are talking about, and they shot him.
Nazi's case is highly unusual, as he gave strikingly accurate details of the previous personality. Dr. Ian Stevenson, while studying such cases for over 2 decades, made an interesting discovery. He noticed that at least 1/3 of the subjects he'd interviewed who had memories of a past life also had curious birthmarks or birth defects. that do not have an explanation in this life. The location of those birthmarks corresponded with often fatal wounds on the bodies of the deceased persons they claimed to have been. In several cases, Dr. Stevenson was also able to present to the world photographic evidence of this remarkable correlation between birthmarks or birth defects and fatal wounds.
Ian was always very interested in psychosomatic medicine, the interaction between mind and body, so these cases really intrigued him quite a bit. And he spent years studying and collecting them. He eventually published a book, Reincarnation in Biology, which is 2,000 pages long and has over 200 of these cases. And most of them involve not just sort of the usual blemish like anyone have, but some very unusual and at times pronounced marks or defects.
We can understand how this might be possible by looking at the interaction between psychological and physical issues. To start with, studies have shown that mental factors can produce general changes in the body. For instance, stress can contribute to illness, and hopelessness has been shown to increase the risk of heart attack and cancer. What is far less accepted is the idea that individual mental images can produce very specific changes in the body. And this is what we need to consider in order to make sense of these birthmark cases.
So like there was a little girl who remembered the life of a man who was murdered and his fingers were chopped off at the end of his life, and that she was born with very mangled fingers. There's another little boy who remembered the life of a boy in another village who had lost the fingers of his right hand in a fodder chopping machine. And this boy was born, his left hand was perfectly normal, and his right hand just had stubs for fingers. So that's a very unusual defect and matched the other features of the case. So there are ones like that where the body presents physical evidence of this connection to a past life.
There are many examples of birthmarks and birth defects that are truly remarkable. One such case is that of Titu Singh from India. Titu Singh was 2.5 years old when he began to tell his family of his other life in the city of Agra. His memories were quite specific. He said his name was Suresh Verma. He was the owner of a radio, television and video shop. He had a wife named Uma and 2 children. He also said that he had been shot, cremated, and his ashes had been immersed in the river. Titu was born with birthmarks that exactly matched the bullet wounds on Suresh's head.
Titu, who had a birthmark here in his temple, and I looked to see if I could see any birthmark in the back of his head, didn't. And then we went to the hospital and got the autopsy for Suresh, and the bullet had entered here, just exactly the same spot in Suresh's temple, and exited behind his ear on the same side. And sure enough, his skull is distended there. And, you know, I asked his mother, was that there from birth? And she said, oh yes, oh yes.
These cases are evidence supporting the reincarnation explanation and indicate that emotions, attachments, fears, addictions, likes and dislikes, and even identification with a particular country or gender may be able to carry over from one life to the next. In the scientific world, the primary criticism of reincarnation is that it cannot happen because the material world is all that exists. In such a view, consciousness is only the result of a functional brain, and it ends when the brain dies. However, the study of near-death experiences and past life memories strongly suggests that not only consciousness, but also emotions and memories survive beyond death. From what we've seen, it's clear that the body of evidence from accumulated past life cases cannot be explained away by insisting that subjects have gained their knowledge from the course of normal events, from guesswork, or from exaggeration. There is, however, one more possible explanation. Could all these cases just be elaborate hoaxes? Frauds orchestrated either by the subject's family, or the investigators? Are all memories of past lives simply fake?
If you read Stevenson's cases, you think, okay, the only way that this could be completely normal is if either Stevenson was a fool and he wasn't paying attention to the clues that the kids were being put up to this or being fed this information, or that there was an intentional fraud by the family and that these people were sort of pulling it over on them. And I decided, well, the only way that I'll be able to judge those remaining possibilities are if I actually saw Stevenson at work.
Tom Schroeder travelled extensively with Dr. Stevenson in Lebanon and India in order to observe and analyse Stevenson's cases as he investigated them in the homes of the subjects, their relatives, and the families to which the subjects claimed to have belonged.
First we went to Lebanon, and there are a lot of cases, remembered lives among the Druze in Lebanon. And so we visited a number of cases there in and around Beirut. And then a few months later we went to India, and we were mostly in the north. We probably went down about as far as the middle of the country. But we were in some very remote areas, areas that, we hired a driver, and it would take 8 hours just to arrive at the interview, going on some very bad roads. We got stuck in the mud a number of times. We hit roadblocks where people who might have been officials or they might have been bandits were, basically shook us down for some money. We also encountered some hostile crowds who misunderstood our presence, and they saw the cameras and the tape recorders and the Western dress, and they figured, well, what's in it for them? And, or maybe they thought we were going to, try to steal one of their children.
Dr. Stevenson had over 3,000 cases in his files at the time Tom Schroeder met him.
Both Stevenson and I were the first thing we were looking out for was obvious fraud or maybe some kind of insanity on the part of the families or the children, or wishful thinking or whatever. But in case after case, what really struck me was these were nice, normal, very reasonable people who were, in some cases, as sort of mystified by the fact that they had these memories, that their children had these memories as we were. After a while, you begin to think the odds of all those cases being explained away are almost less than the odds that there's some force at work in the universe that science doesn't quite understand yet.
The trip, Dr. Stevenson's obsessive search for truth, his methods, the tested geographical conditions, and the innocent children in the center of it all had a profound effect on Schroeder.
I really wasn't expecting the cases to be quite as compelling as they actually were in person, and I was expecting that maybe the subjects would seem a little nutty or, transparently, sort of in it for some ulterior motive. But it was right away. I mean, you could just see these were just people like me, just sitting there, and they had this weird experience and didn't quite know what to make of it. And they were just people trying to figure out what this was all about, just like I was. Very normal, very sane, very articulate. They weren't pushing it. They really didn't care whether we believed them or not. We were asking them to tell us the story, and they were telling us, and in some cases very reluctantly. So he was going about it looking for ways to disprove that these things the children were saying had come from a previous life memory, and to show that they actually had come from normal sources. And only when those were all ruled out did he say, I think that what we have here is a case where of probable that it's a paranormal reason. And paranormal in the strict sense, meaning that it's a reason beyond anything that we currently scientifically understand.
Ian himself didn't claim that he had proved reincarnation, but he definitely amassed a tremendous and invaluable amount of information that demonstrates that reincarnation is the only explanation that thoroughly explains the over 2,000, 3,000 cases.
Reincarnation was a word that he didn't shy away from. But reincarnation, the term means different things to different people. And I think what we can say is that the cases, if you accept them, they do provide evidence that memories and emotions and even mental images can sometimes show up in a child that previously belonged to somebody else.
Past life memories research strongly suggests the possibility that something survives death. But what is it that survives? How can a person consciously or unconsciously talk about another person as himself? Where do these memories come from? Does our consciousness hold these memories? How and where does this consciousness come from? To unravel this mystery of life, death, and reincarnation, let's explore the phenomenon of consciousness.